We're live.
Okay. WEM Live.
WEM Hangout, huh?
Episode 1. So we've got Brandon Keys with us today. Brandon, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
I know you've prepared some stuff for us to talk about, so I will throw it over to you.
Yeah, so we've had a lot of craziness come into the markets here in this past week and in the Bitcoin space, to say the very least. So we've got the Fed and Jerome Powell, and the whole Jackson Hole thing was literally going on earlier today. So we'll riff on that in a minute. And then we've also had a bunch of sovereign wealth funds double and triple and quadruple down on their Bitcoin exposure throughout this past week. So this is somewhat accelerating the Bitcoin supply shock. Obviously, everybody knows the fixed supply of the 21 million. And, you know, what we've been seeing is Bitcoin get scooped up off exchanges, and all of these treasury companies coming into these OTC desks with only 155,000 Bitcoin left on OTC desks. It's cooking up for something extra spicy, but I wanted to start off with you guys here first about what we heard from Jerome Powell at the Jackson Hole meeting. So we've got the tweet up here of how Jerome Powell and the Fed essentially said that they're going to adopt new framework and remove the 2% inflation target because the Fed has not hit that inflation target in over 4 years. So no matter what you think about, you know, this administration, the past administration, inflation seems to be extra sticky. And the markets absolutely erupted on all of this news. So I want to hear what you guys think about, you know, just the overall Fed, you know, just essentially admitting that they can't get inflation under wraps at this point. And they're going to keep moving that target farther and farther away. Well, I'm not sure if I lost everybody here, but from what I can tell is that, you know, we might have lost them just for a minute. So while they were talking about this, we're going to look at what Jerome Powell has essentially been saying here. And he essentially just kind of went through this entire Jackson Hole meeting, saying that inflation is still running rampant, but it's setting up for more terms to potentially cut interest rates here in September. I mean, essentially, we saw that the inflation target is rised up, and that the Fed now is going to cut interest rates potentially in September. That percent chance, and this according to the CME group and the market, increased to 85% here. And we saw something unique as well, that the Fed, that the market is essentially pricing in 2 rate cuts opposed to 3 rate cuts this year. So in reality, what we saw from all of this was a giant green candle from Bitcoin here, getting priced up above over 16%. Now, I'm not sure if you guys can hear me throughout all of this. I know we see All Nighter Hider in the chat, so make sure to let me know if you guys can hear me through all of this. But what we are seeing is that everybody in the market is looking for an inflationary hedge in a sense of the word. So this inflation hedge, what we're seeing is Bitcoin. So now we got the boys back. So hopefully we can get the audio all settled out here. But guys, I was ripping and rolling on how we're essentially seeing the Fed move that inflation target. So I'm curious what you guys think of all of this. And it sounds like I can hear you guys a little bit more now here. Well, I mean, I got the boys. I got Stacks. I don't know if you can hear me, Stacks.
I can hear you, big guy.
All right. So what do you think of the Fed moving that inflation target over to something like a 2 to potentially 3% as they keep moving the target away and away and away?
I feel like it's an extension of the bullshit lie that we've been fed for a long time. I just, I'm numb to it at this point. I'm just numb to it, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, with all of these movements, right? I mean, it just kind of shows that the true fixed supply of Bitcoin and what that means going forward, right? I mean, just trying to get back to those hard money principles is extremely vital, because what we got is, Bitcoin getting scooped up off exchanges at an all-time rate. I mean, if you look at this chart here, you see Bitcoin essentially, 50,000 or 500,000, excuse me, Bitcoin getting scooped up off of exchanges over the past year. And that number is accelerating. More and more people keep taking Bitcoin off exchanges. More and more buys keep happening. And on top of it, we see the OTC desks continuing to run dry as we've got all of this here coming forward. So I think the unique thing that we're seeing is we're seeing a lot of bigger players start to come onto the market, right? So whether that is, sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, governments, all of these different companies starting to come online, that's the unique thing that we're seeing is these big players coming, and they're not coming very slowly. They're coming very quickly with large sums of capital. So I think that we are going to continue to see this, accelerate over time. And that is going to push the potential of this, supply shock coming very quickly. So with this, right, we're seeing more and more guys coming in, and it's not slowing down by any means. It's in fact speeding up. And I don't know if we're going to get this audio here as we've been having issues, but we've got Eric Trump, who said something very unique here the other day. And I'll play this clip for you guys. And I want you to take a close listen as to what he was saying with, all of these different big players, let's call it, coming in, and the potential of more.
Guys, I see that all over the world, right? I spend a lot of time in just about every country, on just about every continent. I've got projects, and I talk to people, and honestly, the race toward cryptocurrency is electric right now. I mean, it is absolutely electric. I don't care if you're talking to the top leaders of various countries, where they're saying, in the winter, when it's not nearly as hot, I'm going to take all the energy supply from my major city, and I'm going to, dedicate it to Bitcoin mining. I really believe in that asset. Or, our country just bought, 200,000 Bitcoin, and we did so very quietly. We don't want anybody to know about it, but that's how much we believe in the asset.
So essentially, Eric Trump was here saying, hey, you know what? We've had a bunch of different countries come and talk to us specifically about Bitcoin mining and what that is, how we could utilize that going forward to utilize some of our free energy. And then he also hinted at a mystery country that may have bought over 200,000 Bitcoin, and they didn't want anybody to know. Now, why I think this is important is because of just the supply shock that we're seeing, right? I mean, the amount of Bitcoin that comes into daily circulation is well less than that 200,000 mark. And we have only 155,000 Bitcoin left on OTC desk, which is where these big players come and go. And for those of you who don't know the standards for these OTC desks, typically it's $50,000, dollar purchases or more as we see that come in forward. So these big guys, obviously he's talking about a $22 billion buy. So these guys aren't signing into a Coinbase account or a Kraken account or anything like that. They're coming to big players to make big time plays here. And this is what we're seeing, is that big money is officially here, and it's here to stay. And they're coming in and they're buying very quickly. I mean, look at the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund. I mean, it's the biggest sovereign wealth fund in the world, and they keep doubling and tripling down all of what we are seeing. So with that, right, the Norway Sovereign Wealth Fund upped their indirect Bitcoin exposure in 2025. So this fund does not hold Bitcoin directly, so let's make sure we get that on track. But they increased their exposure of 192% over the last year for these quote-unquote crypto-related companies. Now, for those of you guys who don't know me, I'm Brandon, and I don't enjoy the word crypto, but hey, you know what? We got to make do with what some of these articles say. And, they've increased their exposure of strategy MetaPlanet, and another crypto exchange in Coinbase. Of course, Strategy and MetaPlanet are essentially just Bitcoin holding companies. And Strategy is number one in the amount of Bitcoin on the balance sheet right now. And what we are seeing is that MetaPlanet and potentially the Japanese market, as Michael Saylor continues to say, could be that number two here very closely. So, we do have MicroStrategy or MSTR Strategy B now at 630,000 Bitcoin just about, and MetaPlanet at nearly 20,000 with like 18,888. And that number keeps on ticking on up. I wouldn't be surprised if MetaPlanet, we start to see the amount of debt that they're able to raise continues to rise up and they pass Marathon. Now, of course, it seems like it's a race for number two. So the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Norway continuing to increase their indirect exposure is something to keep a very close eye on here, right? So these things are just accelerating that Bitcoin supply shock because, we've got the MSTR flywheel or the strategy flywheel that we continue to see trek along, right? So I really love to show this graphic here on the flywheel for those of you guys who are not familiar with how MSTR just continues to buy up Bitcoin, but essentially they keep just issuing debt to buy that Bitcoin. Once the Bitcoin price increases and the market cap increases, although we've had, a little bit of a disconnect between the two, and we'll get into that here later on. So make sure you guys are sticking around. That MSTR market cap increasing, the weight in the indices increasing, and then the issues, and then MSTR will continue to issue more equity to buy more Bitcoin. And then, the flywheel keeps on going. They keep buying more Bitcoin. Well, if the biggest pension fund or sovereign wealth fund in the world keeps buying more MSTR, well, that type of money is going to continue to just make MSTR be able to issue more debt and buy up more Bitcoin, and them to just keep scooping up and get farther and farther ahead. So the top dog in MicroStrategy is getting bought up by the Norwegian pension fund, which is a $1.7 trillion giant. Now, that is absolutely massive. And we're going to get into some of these other big players here, where you have the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and some others who have massive amounts of Bitcoin exposure as well. So that is going to continue to see, some big players start to come in here, right? So I think that we need to keep a very close eye on what we've got and all of these guys coming in here. And I think we've maybe got the boys back. So Robert and Eric, do we have you guys here now?
I don't know. Do you?
Seems like we're back. We have
we have
an internet technician here working on things, and he reset.
There we go.
Reset our connection in the middle of our first stream. So
this is to be expected. Stream number one, working out the kinks.
We got to work out a little bit of the kinks. Well, I mean, while you guys were gone, I'll just kind of refresh and rehash what I was ranting about. But essentially, I was talking about Jerome Powell, how they essentially said that they're going to cut interest rates here, even though the inflationary concerns might not be complete. We have the market pricing in 2 rate cuts instead of 3 like it was previously. And that sent Bitcoin up in a little bit of a tizzy here as we saw this giant green candle come through, and not quite to that all-time high, but we're seeing all the assets start to peak up. So I was just kind of talking about the overall fixed supply and how the inflation is just not going away at this point, it seems. And no matter what lever the Fed is pulling, we're still having this thing run wild. So I'm curious what you guys think of the Fed's job and what we're seeing here.
Well, the Fed's job is to tell you it does anything other than print money. And then, in fact, that's all it does is print money.
And gaslight.
And gaslight. Yeah, basically gaslights you into all of these other things. Like, it can manage even this idea of managing the inflation target. It's a fundamentally broken. I'm sorry, I always have to bring this up every time, but it is impossible to quantify inflation, right? You cannot, it's as subjective as value itself. So all you can do is put together a basket of goods, which indeed the Fed does. And then anytime that basket of goods includes things that have a price that changes too quickly, they then exclude those things so that they can back into the number that they want. And you could look at a site like shadowstats.org to see how they've changed the inflation calculation over the years and what it would actually be based on a 1980s calculation versus a 1990s versus a current calculation. Despite all of those machinations, they still cannot hit their 2% target. This is kind of like creating a test that you know the answers to, but you still can't get the answer right. Like they're just peak retard over there.
What's increasing at 2%? Box starch, your Netflix subscription?
You'd have to go look at the basket of goods that they've named. I don't keep up with it anymore because this is all so thoroughly. Sorry, Brandon. I know you did a lot of work putting this together for us, but this is all thoroughly disinteresting to me because it's all bullshit. Right? The Fed is a currency counterfeiting cartel. All of this smoke and mirrors, 2% management, trying to get the inflation low and the employment high. Like it's all bullshit, right? They're just there to steal from you. The numbers bullshit. It can't be calculated. They're just stealing your life's work by printing money. So sell all your dollars and buy Bitcoin.
How would you calculate it? Wouldn't it be a mathematical vector?
It's like saying how do I quantify your subjective valuation of a thing? It's impossible.
Yeah.
It's subjective, right? It's what are the things you want to buy? Okay. The things you want to buy are going to be different than the things I want to buy. So the price changes in those things. Every market actor gets their own inflation coefficient if you want to get real about it. And then you could average all those coefficients together. But it's a nonsense idea. And so Bitcoin isn't an inflation hedge. It is the destroyer of the euphemism that is inflation that is used to disguise the invisible theft of fiat currency counterfeiting that's used to rule your life.
Mic drop.
I love that. And this is one of my favorite websites here that just kind of highlights the manipulation. It's govflation.com. So they show how the CPI print, once they started to change the evaluation here. And as you can see, I mean, it's just gotten a farther and farther gap in between because they keep just manipulating the basket of goods. And so as we keep just kind of rolling this along, right, it's just making the facade ever so greater that they're reporting this data that it's just, I mean, completely faulty. So I think like we're going to start to move away, and I think the distrust from the government is just starting to increase here, and I think that's going to push more people to Bitcoin in the interim. But we're starting to see, people just have that distrust and looking for, I guess, another type of asset. And I showed this clip a little bit earlier about Eric Trump and him essentially saying that the other countries around the globe are looking into Bitcoin mining. And then we even potentially have a mystery country buying 200,000 worth of Bitcoin, $22 billion worth. And they didn't want anybody to know because they don't want the price to essentially shoot up on that news. Now, do you guys see like more of the, I guess, flocking away from the dollar as sort of like accelerating this Bitcoin adoption that we're in, because we're starting to have a lot of nation states, pensions, sovereign wealth funds, everybody essentially going towards Bitcoin and really just kind of getting away from everything else, whether it's the stock market, bonds, everything. And just essentially seeing that, Bitcoin is that apex predator that people describe it as.
Yeah, it definitely seems that the world is figuring out that Bitcoin is the better investment. And so I don't think anybody's flocking away from the dollar. I think that they're just parking their dollars in another asset, an asset that's significantly better. But I got a question. So Powell moves the inflation, the CPI target to 3%, correct? Is that what he announced today?
Yeah, well, I mean, he basically announced that it's not going to 2%, that they're going to look into raising it because the CPI print hasn't hit 2% in over 4 years.
Gotcha. And then so who's selling their Bitcoin to cause the price to drop and who's buying it? It makes me just think of a Sailor quote. In 2023, he was on stage at BTC Prague and he said, "Trading Bitcoin is a sign of lesser intellect." So when I see these price swings, I'm like, who the fuck who's buying and selling this stuff? Do you know who's buying and selling? Is it a bunch of Wall Street dummies or what?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of the whales have essentially been selling off recently, whether they had like 100,000 price target or whatever. So they've been just kind of selling a little bit off the top. But we do have a lot of buying pressure starting to come in. And that's where I think, like, it's essentially that meme where the polar bear is pushing the beach ball underneath the water. Eventually, it's just going to explode and shoot up. And I think that's what we're starting to see is a lot of, the whales, maybe they held Bitcoin for 10, 15, 10, 12, 13 years. And then we're starting to see, hey, you know what? I'll take a little bit off the top, go live my life and maybe keep some in the Bitcoin. But the new guys are starting to come in and they're starting to come in with a lot of money. So I think they're just kind of like short-term movements here. And I think the pressure is eventually going to start to see the Bitcoin price start to go up here pretty quickly.
You taking any off the top, big guy?
No.
No. Trying to prove a point.
The strategy with Bitcoin is, this is what Bitcoin incentivizes you to do, by the way, right? Run yourself profitably. So earn more than you spend, save, and delay gratification and delay consumption. So save that money for something you really want to buy, dream house, dream business, whatever the thing may be.
I'm in the market for a 10-inch Mark 18 Daniel Defense rifle.
There you go. That's not too expensive.
Not
the thing is, though, like and you said whales are selling. Obviously, the lower your basis in Bitcoin is, the higher the incentive you have to sell it, right? Your unrealized gain gets larger and larger relative to your basis the longer you've been in. So I always use the metaphor of an Indian run. If you guys have ever done one of those, it's like people are running in a single file line. The person at the back of the line has to run to catch up to the person in the front of the line, and you keep doing that. It's kind of like that with Bitcoin market cycles, right? There's people with a really low basis, Bitcoin goes to a high price, they cash out because they have the psychological price target of $100,000 or whatever it may be. New people are coming to understand what this thing is, or they're chasing the price. So then they're coming in, they have a higher basis, they have a lower incentive to sell, and it just continuously recycles its own price floors in that way. But of course, it goes through giant booms and giant busts because it gets way overbought and then gets way oversold in the bottoms. And so we get a lot of volatility, but the volatility, of course, comes down as market cap goes up. So I think that same cycle is going on now, but it is all speculative. I mean, there's some data about some of the wallets to answer your question, like who's selling. There's some limited data about what wallets are selling, and you can trace some of that to Wells and whatnot. But I don't think you're not going to get a very crystal clear answer on that.
Yeah, 80,000 coins got dumped onto the market last 2 weeks or something, Brandon?
Yeah. Like one big giant whale, I believe it sold it to an exchange. I don't want to misquote, but I want to say it was like to Gemini. And they sold off a bunch of their Bitcoin. And you barely see the market move when we see these whales dump. So in my eyes, I think this is all very encouraging, just because of, like Robert was saying, the market cap has increased. So when we see a lot dumped onto the market, we of course we get a little bit drawdown here, but it seems like it's holding pretty tight here at this 110 plus area, and we'll start to see that increase. But Robert, you said something interesting about the volatility going down, and I want to dive into that a little bit more, because I'm sort of under the feeling that with these big players coming in, the amount of money that we start to see, even though the market cap is increasing, and that would imply that the volatility would decrease. We've never really had an asset like Bitcoin before where it's truly fixed. Now, of course, we need the market cap to increase and everything like that to see the Bitcoin price increase. But do you see any potential of this supply shock coming? And, although the narrative is we'll kind of crab walk our way up, where all of a sudden the top will be blown off just because of, Bitcoin being that truly scarce asset.
I don't like to do short-term price speculation. I think the only thing you should expect with Bitcoin is the unexpected. That being said, to qualify my earlier statement, annualized volatility tends to go down as the market cap of any asset goes up, including Bitcoin, right? It just means it's a deeper more liquid marketplace, so the volatility tends to go down as it grows. That doesn't mean you can't have short-term bouts of extreme volatility. So yeah, what happens when the insatiable human desire to move purchasing power into the future meets a fixed supply money? I mean, what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? Probably fireworks, but I don't think we really know. We've never seen anything like this historically, and that's why it's such an exciting time to be alive.
On that note, how likely do you think it is that we're experiencing a ton of paper Bitcoin?
Well, very likely now that we have, how much Bitcoin is inside of these ETFs at this point? 2 million or something?
We can look at it right here. The ETFs right now have 1.47 million Bitcoin on in all of that.
And none of those are performing proof of reserves. I assume they probably just go through a big four accounting audit once a year or quarter, whatever it may be. So yeah, there's a lot of paper Bitcoin out there. How much is that being used to suppress the price? Who knows? I don't know a good way to figure that out. Gold is a much easier case study on that. I always point people to that website, gata.org. You could look at all these historical price suppression schemes that have been run on gold. And then by way of analogy, see how those could be run on Bitcoin. But as far as like actually getting some clarity in this space of paper Bitcoin, I think it's very, very difficult.
Doesn't one of the ETF issuers have proof of reserves? Fidelity, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong on that one.
Yeah, so Fidelity does. Fidelity and I believe ARK did as well. But the other troubling aspect of this is I believe like 9 of the 12 or 13 Bitcoin ETFs are, used Coinbase as the custodian. So there is that potential, centralization attack of Coinbase. Basically, being the main custodian. They've been hacked before. It's definitely not out of the question that they could be hacked again. Of course, the most recent hack was customer data. But I mean, when they don't have to report all these things and, you have the Fed and like the SEC as these trusted partners, quote unquote, to audit these guys. I mean, I don't really trust the Fed or the SEC to audit on a Bitcoin ledger to make sure Coinbase has all the Bitcoin that they've said. And of course, we got the, fractional reserve banking aspects of all of it too. So, I mean, I think that there's a lot of, I guess, potential issues with all of this. That's why, I'm one to preach that self-custody aspect just because of, what the paper Bitcoin that you guys are talking about here.
Not your keys, not your cheese.
Yep.
That applies everywhere.
When I think about this, I think that there is potentially the largest incentive there has ever been to suppress the Bitcoin price. I was excited when Trump signed into effect the SBR. But then the first thing I started to think is like, wait a second, that's a huge incentive to manipulate the price. You got real money here. And how do you buy cheap sats? You sell paper Bitcoin and you let people get wrecked buying fart coin. I mean, I got an email from fucking Coinbase the other day. I gotta pull this up. It's not fart coin. It's another one. It's preposterous.
Well, there's one called Useless I saw recently.
Useless. Get some useless coin.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
At least they're honest. I think Useless might be my favorite shitcoin.
It's
an honest shitcoin.
It is honest.
I want to just read this. This is something Preston Pish tweeted earlier. He said, fiat is so fragile and manipulated that some old dude can mutter 15 words and markets around the world whipsaw to the tune of trillions of dollars in a matter of minutes. Humans have built their entire exchange of energy between each other on this scheme of a system. Decades later, we will truly be laughing at how primitive it all was. And I think that's very interesting, right? Like what delusion do we have that we live in a free market where one man can step on a pedestal and utter a few words and then all of a sudden liquidity starts sloshing all different directions? Like if that is not a testament to the reality that we live in a centrally planned world, like we're very far from a free market economy, then I don't know what else is. And I responded to Preston's tweet by saying, meanwhile, in Bitcoin, anyone can memorize 12 words and liberate themselves from the asymmetrical disadvantages of the fiat financial system and place their feet firmly on a perfectly and permanently level playing field. So that's the difference between central banking and Bitcoin. Central banking, one old guy mutters 15 words and markets all around the world go rattling. I don't even think we call them markets anymore. I mean, they're like pseudo markets basically. And in Bitcoin, you can just completely opt out of that entire system by just memorizing 12 words for yourself.
12 words away from freedom. So simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, with that, right? I mean, we even have like the dollar. You see these giant dumps of the dollar just from like 1 hour. Like this markets shouldn't like the currency markets shouldn't have these giant dips like this. I mean, granted, look, it's 1%, but still the dollar falling 1% or the Dixie falling 1% in a single day, just basically off of what Jerome Powell had to say within, a 10-minute period. These markets are just getting more and more volatile. And I think that's just kind of a recipe of disaster, because we have such violent swings ups and downs. And with the exchange of information that we have now, it's basically like you were saying, Robert, where we don't have like a free market anymore. And, Preston and what Jerome Powell was saying here just kind of highlights that when we see these violent swings in the market.
Yeah, the Dixie, I think this is another one of these ridiculous indices that we're also obsessed with. When in reality, it's just shitcoin USD measured in terms of all these other shitcoin national currencies. Like, who gives a shit, right? It's all about Bitcoin. If you're still denominating yourself in dollars or anything worse, then you are deluded.
And quick question here. I guess this flew over my head. Did he formally announce anything? Or was it like where we might be doing a thing? We might be changing the target.
Yeah, so he essentially just said like, we're going to be changing the target. The exact quote, this was from here. Let me pull that back up. But I mean, essentially, like Jackson Hole, they come out and they say, all of the different aspects of what they're viewing the overall economy, what's potentially going to be there, and everybody just reads into the different terms. And I mean, we have people breaking down what he can do based on the color tie that Jerome Powell is wearing. So, I mean, just take that for what it is. But essentially, he said that the Fed has adopted a new framework that removes a reference to the central bank seeking inflation that averages 2% over time. So essentially, they're saying they're removing the old 2%. And they've developed something new, but they didn't really announce as to what, and they didn't dive into what this is.
It's always more obfuscation, right? Just like after the big print during the pandemic of 2020, when they printed somewhere between like $6 and $8 trillion, they started to redefine M0, redefine M1, redefine M2. So the Fed itself, which is again the central planning of money, cannot even define money. Much less can it define inflation, much less can it quantify it. Like, it's just all, this is why I don't know what else to say. It's like, just unplug from all of this. It's all a lie. It's all bullshit. It's all smoke and mirrors. None of it's real. It's all made up. It's like that game show, Whose Line Is It Anyways, where the points don't matter. That's basically the game we're living in the global economy.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically like what Lynn Alden says, right? Nothing stops this train, because it seems like we're just going closer and closer to money printing, and we're just going to be under this debt spiral that's going to spiral out of control. And I think that this just is something that's going to accelerate it here. But I'm kind of curious what you think of the monetary policy as we see it developing here, because we've essentially had Trump try to come in and flip things on its head. Trump talk about building a sovereign wealth fund for the United States, but we're just so far in debt. And the way that we created the Doge and then kicked it to the curb very quickly in this 8-month period, it seems like everything's just kind of up for grabs at this point, and we don't really have a clear path forward. So, what do you take of basically the political theater that we have going on here, Robert and Eric?
Well, I think it's exactly what you just said. I think it's political theater. And you know, another thing too, it's like the big print. The big print seems like it's coming. New currency is being minted every day. So when they talk about reducing the rate, they're just going to increase the rate in which new currency is being printed. But it is being printed every day through fractional reserve banking. Every day, new currency is being minted. So when people are like, when are we going to print money? Like, money is being printed every day. So and it is theater. I struggle with it. Maybe it's the mind virus has just got me to the point where like I borderline have just checked out. You know, I wake up in the morning and when Bitcoin is $117,000, I'm more surprised than if I woke up and it was like 225 tomorrow morning.
Just to put some numbers around the idea of the big print that's, well, inevitably on the horizon. And I will use the word inevitably that I don't even use that word for Bitcoin actually. Like,
no,
but money printing is basically inevitable. It's the one thing human beings have been addicted to across all of history. It's led to the downfall of every great civilization there has ever been. And without exception, it is the thing that people can't stop doing if they have access to it, right? It's this irresistible temptation. So 2008, we print $700 billion after the great financial crisis, right? That was a lot of money back then. This was a huge bailout, went to fund a lot of bank bailouts, et cetera, et cetera. That was a lot of money in 2008. Well, fast forward to 2020, post-pandemic, again, we print somewhere between 6 and 8 trillion. So that's 6,000 to 8,000 billion dollars. That's more than 10x, roughly 10x what we printed in 2008, 12 years later. So if that trajectory holds, I would expect to see like an 70 to 80 trillion dollar print between now and the year 2032. And these numbers sound insane, but again, go back to 2008, and at the time the Fed's, what was the Fed's balance sheet in 2008? You'd have to pull that up, but I would say it's probably in the $6 to $8 trillion range. Like, to tell people in 2008, hey, in 12 years they're going to print $6 to $8 trillion. Like, what do you mean? They're going to double the Fed's balance sheet in like one go? And people would say you were insane. But this is how it goes. It's every time you print money, you put exponentially more liabilities into the system. When that inevitably collapses, you then have to print exponentially more money to shore up those defaulted liabilities. And so this is called the law of accelerating issuance and depreciation by some old economists. It's basically the inevitable death spiral of fiat currency money printing. It always ends the same way in hyperinflation or the country that's printing getting conquered. There are no exceptions. Buckle up, buy Bitcoin.
Here's a potentially stupid question. What the fuck is on the Fed's balance sheet? Treasuries?
Treasuries.
So they have nothing.
They
got nothing on the balance sheet.
Yeah, we've talked about it a lot. U.S. government issues U.S. Treasury shitcoin ad infinitum. They use that to borrow USD Fed shitcoin, which is also printed ad infinitum, and it's born ad interest, right? So you're paying interest to the Fed before the government even gets access to the money. And then the government doles it out as they see fit, right? They didn't earn any of it. They stole all of it through money printing. And so anytime you hear the debt ceilings going up, or, it's all just coded language, quantitative easing. These are all coded euphemisms for money printing. But it all boils down to money printing. Don't let anyone ever, and another argument people try to make is like, oh, well, technically the Fed doesn't print money. It's the commercial banking sector. It's like, okay, those commercial banks would not print money if which is basically they're loaning out additional money to expand the money supply. If they did not have the required reserve ratios and other policy mechanics of the Fed underpinning those banks, the commercial banking sector is effectively non-private because of the existence of the central bank. Anyone that tries to get you lost in that complexification is either a charlatan or a retard. Okay, it's all money printing.
Well, it's currency printing. Bitcoin's the
currency
first
counterfeiting, technically. Money printing is the colloquial term.
Yeah.
This is all legalized currency counterfeiting.
Makes me think of Mike Maloney, who I used to listen to years ago. Currency. Bitcoin's the first money we've ever had. We had a yellow shiny rock. We use it as money. The nation state issues currency, forces us to use it at the barrel of a gun. Bitcoin's the first engineered money we've ever had.
Yeah, it depends how you define currency. Like if it's the legally authorized or government imposed form of money, also tends to be the thing that circulates, right? The thing that's actually spent mostly. So in a gold-backed world, you had gold which is physical money, and then paper derivatives on top of it that's circulated as currency. So together they are a money and a currency, but they're also separable, right? Layer 1 gold, layer 2 dollar. But then when you remove layer 1, you just have layer 2 circulating shitcoin that can be printed ad infinitum, used to rob everyone blind in broad daylight. So yeah, it's really bad, guy. I don't know. Like, we've been talking about it for 5 years. I'm tired of talking about it. I'm tired of hearing about the Fed doing this and the Fed doing that. It's like, it's all, these are like, in, I don't know, 100 years, we're going to look back on these people as like the economic high priest, the false priest of modernity, right? They come out, instead of looking at animal entrails, he does, licks his finger and holds it up and says, oh, we're going to adjust our inflation target to 3% instead of 2%. And everyone's like, ah. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. It's truly crazy. Bitcoin doesn't do any of this, by the way, right? It just does exactly what it says it will do forever. It's perfect integrity. There's going to be 21 million. Here's the halving schedule. We're going to stick to this. Every 2 weeks we adjust based on for the difficulty adjustment for how many new miners came online. It is the antithesis of central banking, where they are constantly pulling the wool over your eyes, manipulating you, lying to you, gaslighting you, printing money to steal from you, using that printed money to wage war, propaganda, false news, etc. Bitcoin just is what it says it is, and nothing else.
It's refreshing. How do you do all this, Brandon, and stay sane? When you showed up, we recorded a podcast, you left. I was like, gosh, I fucking like that guy. He's got good energy, dude. You're exposed to all this nonsense and you manage to stay optimistic, positive, keep that smile on your face. I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, I mean, just because I think like Bitcoin is the, I just think we're gonna win. I think I don't know if you guys can hear me, but I just think at this point in time, like we're looking at everything, and there's just no doubt in my mind that we're gonna win with everything that you guys are lining out. And I mean, we're already starting to see that start to take over in governments because, say what you want about the democracies and everything else, but I think something very interesting happened here in this past election where, it lined out where the government in the United States, at least, realized that we needed to embrace Bitcoin, or at least act like we are friendly to quote unquote crypto in order to gain more votes and gain more power. So I think eventually, those incentives are just going to win over. And I think just over time, Bitcoin's going to chip away at all these guys, and, more of these corrupt individuals are just going to get taken out of power. And then we're going to start to see some more things try to be experimented with Bitcoin. I mean, we're seeing the financialization or the Bitcoinization of finance right now, with putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And I think that, on top of, the potential of strategic reserves in countries that are suffering massive amounts of hyperinflation, we've had 50 years of just everything going to shit. I mean, I think, as a young guy, I got to feel a little bit optimistic about the future, right? I mean, there's got to be something to build towards here, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I'm extremely optimistic in my life. When we come back to talk about this stuff, it's like, oh, what's the Fed doing today? I'm like, all right, here we got to unpack the whole thing again. Like, I don't want to operate inside of the paradigm of central banking and talk about like what Jerome Powell is actually doing is anything relevant whatsoever. I mean, obviously it is relevant, but it's relevant inside of a very limited scope. And so I guess my aim is to try to help people expand their scope and see the reality of what's going on. If you just get trapped in this vernacular of what the state's doing or what the central bank is doing, then you can never get outside of that Overton window, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like Bitcoin, people ask, I get in conversations with people sometimes and they're like, when is hyper Bitcoinization going to come? And I guess the definition for hyper Bitcoinization is different for the average individual for me than it is for me. But I feel like we're in the midst of it. And that beautiful world of abundance and prices falling forever, like it's available now. And like I live it in Bitcoin terms. Like everything that I want is getting less expensive. So in some ways, I've literally checked out of the system. I live in an entirely new system. I have to interface with the old world. But every day I feel like that's changing. And the worse it gets in fiat land, the better it gets in Bitcoin. And like, I was talking with our producer this morning, we kind of, shooting this shit about, to transition into a more evenly distributed world where people have access to abundance, and it's here now for you. So I just want to strike a highlighter across that to anybody listening. Just buy Bitcoin, enjoy your life. It's here, it's happening.
Let it change you, like keep studying Bitcoin. And I think whatever path you take down the infinite Bitcoin rabbit hole, it will change you for the better. Right. I know I live my dream life every day, right? I work out, I get sun, I eat right. And sure, life has its troubles and its challenges, but I feel like I'm always in an optimal situation to deal with them rather than being distracted by all these fiat matrix illusions and, thinking that, I don't know, a politician is going to solve your problems or that Jerome Powell somehow actually wields any authority. Like it's all hocus pocus, smoke and mirror bullshit. So if you want to be in touch with the real world, like study Bitcoin, let it change you, let your life be improved by it.
Yeah, and I think something unique, I talked to this with Stacks the other day. The amount of Bitcoin wallets that have 1 million sats or more is about 13 million. And then there's 59 million millionaires in the world. So $1 million used to mean something. The more you move into this new system, what? 1 million sats is like $1,100, $1,200 right now. Sure, that's a lot of money on the surface, but when you kind of put it in that framing that you could be in a more exclusive class for $1,100, $1,200 than millionaires, I think that just kind of lines out that we're still very early, and that everybody needs to study Bitcoin to see it kind of continuing to rip forward. And we're getting closer to that hyper Bitcoinization. But I think at the same time, when we take a step back and we look at the numbers, it's like, wow, at least from my perspective, we're still very early, and there's a lot of people that are still just asleep at the wheel, it seems.
Yeah, that's why it's such an asymmetric opportunity for people who are willing to be studious and have humility and look into the thing. It's there, right? There's more information out there than ever about Bitcoin. There's amazing books written about it. There's countless articles and podcasts. Like it's only thing standing between you and that more optimized version of you is studying Bitcoin. And you literally have nothing to lose. Like you could study all Bitcoin you wanted. Maybe you reach the conclusion that Bitcoin is bogus and you shouldn't own any of it. But that journey of study will teach you so much about the way the world works, about the way the monetary system works, about the way human psychology works, that you will benefit nonetheless. So it is the strongest financial advice I can give anyone, is to just study Bitcoin and the nature of money.
Yeah, as Saylor says, you work, 40 to 60,000 hours of your life for money. You should probably consider spending 100 studying about what money is.
Bingo.
There we go. It seems like it's, and Saylor's kind of leaving his mark globally. So Robert, obviously you've got the famous Saylor series with all of this, but I'm curious what you think of his impact just globally as we're starting to see, all of these companies start to follow the strategy and, more nation states. Every time he seems to travel somewhere, that nation state is, seemingly popping up with a Bitcoin strategic reserve. I mean, we had Saylor go to Brazil earlier last year, and then just the other day they're now considering a strategic reserve. And then we also had the Philippines file a bill with more than 10,000, or with the potential to buy over 10,000 Bitcoin for their strategic reserve. So what do you think of Saylor's impact just globally when we're seeing it not only on companies but on like the nation state development of Bitcoin? Just when it comes to protecting their citizens and protecting their company's balance sheets.
Yeah, so when he came on the scene back in 2020, I think there was a collective sigh of relief among Bitcoiners. He was kind of a prophesied guy, actually. Bitcoiners were, in our little echo chamber of how Bitcoin is the most fantastic innovation there's ever been. And at some point in that echo chamber, the prophecy was put forth, there's going to be a guy that sees this, that's worth a ton of money and goes all in. and is just going to be the role model for so many other smart money guys that they will quickly imitate. Now, we did not prophesy that he would also be such a brilliant ambassador and eloquent speaker on the topic of Bitcoin and everything else. So, that was awesome. I know my personal feeling was I felt a little bit blue in the face talking about Bitcoin, which I'm still doing years later. So you can tell that's how long I've been talking about it. And it was very nice after having been laughed at by so many smart money Wall Street guys, telling you joined a cult and all this stuff. It was very relieving to have someone like of Saylor's caliber to just point to and be like, you know what, forget everything that I said, just go listen to this guy. And so it was a big weight off of Bitcoiners' shoulders. And I'm just surprised it has taken this long for Bitcoin treasury companies to rise as like the primary imitator of MicroStrategy, which is now strategy. The fact that a company can go from, I think when he started buying Bitcoin in August 2020, there was something like an $800 million market cap. What's Strategy's market cap today? 120 billion or so. I'm not sure. That's pretty meteoric, right? Whatever it is, 100 plus X on market cap in 5 years. So 101 billion today because Bitcoin's down, I suppose. You've more than 100X your market cap in 5 years without making any operational changes to your business, just financial changes. How long is it going to take for other companies to emulate that strategy? I'm surprised it took 5 years. I figured after a couple of years, you would see a lot more pouring in.
Yeah, I think the mega corporations don't have the same existential crisis that he had. But I will say, as a viewer, a quiet Bitcoin maxi, when Saylor hit the scene, my fucking mind exploded, dude. Like, I was so pumped when I listened to the Saylor series. That was the moment for me where I was like, oh yeah, this is for real. This is not likely to be stopped. And then I basically panic sold everything else that I possibly could, plowed all in on Bitcoin because I'm so risk adverse. I have 100% allocation to Bitcoin,
which is another crazy aspect of the time we are in, right? When the most conservative asset you can own, the most superior form of private property that has ever existed in the history of the human race and will probably ever exist, it is the ultimate risk-off asset, as a Wall Street player would say, yet it is trading like the ultimate risk-on asset. And again, the delta between that is study. All you got to do is do the homework, and I'm not going to say you'll come to the same conclusion, but there are millions of very intelligent, disagreeable people all over the planet that agree on one thing, and that is that Bitcoin is the ultimate asset, the ultimate form of private property, and the ultimate money.
Yeah, and at 100 and what, 15, 17,000, whatever it is, like as Saylor says, now is the best time to buy Bitcoin because all the risk has been stripped from the asset. It was 10 grand going into COVID, whatever it was. Like there was still a lot more uncertainty that is now no longer there. So when I talk to people and they're like, oh, it's 100 grand, I missed out. I'm like, it's the fucking best time to buy it. Like, when's the best time to plant a tree? Yesterday. When's the second best time to plant a tree? Today. And as long as it stays decentralized and secure, it'll always be the best thing to own. It'll appreciate at a faster rate than everything else forever.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, I liked it when Preston tweeted this out because I think it really highlights just how this is going to revolutionize, I think, everything, just kind of the way companies have been looked at. Because I think that, we've gotten to a point where the Warren Buffetts of the world were evaluating companies on the true value investing and, Ben Graham and all of that, they were looking at the PE ratios. And now we've just seen that not even make any sense. I mean, when I was starting to try to study some of these things, and then you see the GameStop craze of 2020 and all of these, things just shoot up and not really make any sense. I mean, when you look at it, Strategy's net income is 13th ranked on out of every single company in 2025, yet its market cap is 96th. and its price to earning ratio is 495th at 4.7. So I think, the way that Bitcoin and these new accounting rules are kind of, I guess, jumping onto the scene, so to speak, I would be surprised if we don't start to see more corporations just start to, realize this and actually start to try to add value to their shareholders, which is almost seeming like it's a novel concept these days because of the way we've seen just traditional finance just get to a point where it just didn't even make any sense anymore. So I think Bitcoin is essentially fixing everything, and we're starting to see the Bitcoinization of finance slowly take over, and Michael Saylor's a big reason for all of that.
Do you know, has Strategy marked to market their Bitcoin on the balance sheet yet?
Yeah, they have this past quarter, and that's why we saw all of these, big giant, jumps up, and that's why they were, I believe, like one of 10 that saw, like, I want to say either 10 billion of revenue in a certain in a specific quarter, and that was all majority from their Bitcoin holdings. And then they're 13th overall in their net income since the start of 2025. Because Bitcoin was down a little in the first quarter, but all of that has made Strategy just absolutely look like one of the most strong companies in the not in the S&P 500 yet, but soon to join the S&P 500.
And what's the status on that? I was actually just going to ask you that.
I believe that they've reached all the guidelines to do it. So there's estimates that either September, so next month, or the following month, that Strategy is going to join the S&P 500. As long as nothing catastrophic happens and it, market cap absolutely tanks well out of the 500th. But I mean, I think it's top 100 now. So something like really, really catastrophic would have to happen, which I don't foresee anytime soon.
And then another question for you. These nation states that are talking about a Bitcoin treasury, is this, do you know if it's going to be exposure to ETFs, Strategy? I think Norway owns a bunch of shares in Strategy. Or are these conversations, Bitcoin and cold storage, real Bitcoin, spot Bitcoin, or is this ETF garbage?
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of a mix of both. So Norway Sovereign Wealth Fund holds Strategy, they hold, Coinbase, they hold MetaPlanet. So a lot of the sovereign wealth funds are getting exposure that way. UAE and the Abu Dhabi sovereign wealth funds have BlackRock's IBIT Bitcoin ETF. But a lot of these ones, like the Philippines and Brazil, they're all going through bills. So that hasn't really been divulged just yet. They haven't really determined how they're going to hold it. I mean, I'd be honestly very surprised if we get a country holding Bitcoin in cold storage, just because I think a lot of them don't want that risk associated with it, I think. And I think some people just want to be able to point the finger if something goes wrong, right? So whether that's holding it through Coinbase as a custodian, or doing it through an ETF, I think that we'll start to see that initially. But I mean, I think what we saw with gold is something that we'll probably eventually see with Bitcoin, is that over the past 5-6 years, we've actually seen gold ETFs holdings go down, and we've seen the gold price absolutely shoot up. And that's because central banks have been buying up and actually trying to store gold. I mean, we've seen China been doing it for the past 2 decades. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's the initial. What we see is, these central banks, these governments try to buy the ETFs, and then eventually they'll shift towards, holding Bitcoin, the asset. But I think initially what we'll see is a lot of the ETFs, the potential of that paper Bitcoin.
I want to know what Lowry's up to these days. He's been quiet. I feel like he must be behind the scenes working with the U.S. government. But yeah, the thought process, I can't wrap my mind around it. Why would a country buy physical gold and then buy a Bitcoin ETF?
I would be surprised with Russia specifically, because they had the $600 billion of foreign reserves frozen, right, when the armed conflict started. That was such a smack in the face about counterparty risk. I would be very surprised if a nation like Russia did not hold their own keys, and very likely in a multi-key, given that a country like that is accustomed to securing nuclear launch codes, which is also a multi-key setup, right? You have multiple keys that have to be turned in a very specific protocol, at the same time or in the same sequence to activate nuclear launch capabilities. So I don't think, nations that have gone through the pain recently, I could not see them taking undue counterparty risk. I think they will hold their own keys, and I think they'll hold it in a multi-key.
I also think, like, when you look at Russia, not too many years ago, we saw, Russia seize a bunch of Bitcoin miners from like some of these Bitcoin hosting companies. And I don't think we really heard anything following that. So I wouldn't be surprised. Eric Trump said that he knows that a lot of nation states have been looking into Bitcoin mining. I wouldn't be surprised if Russia is one of those, mining Bitcoin and, just essentially holding their own keys in that sense. I think that's, we've seen the Kingdom of Bhutan start to do that as a small little player. But I wouldn't be surprised if more nation states are looking into the mining aspects of it as well. And we just don't really know too much about that just yet.
So going back, Eric Trump leaked the notion that 200,000 Bitcoin were purchased by some nation state. How do we know that happened? Is it show on chain anywhere? Is OTC desks, anything, or is it just some statement that flew out of his mouth?
He said that he travels around the world and he goes to all of these different countries, and that he's talked to a country that has said that they bought 200,000 worth of Bitcoin and they didn't want anybody to know about it. And so we haven't seen that on chain. So we don't know when that occurred or if it occurred over, a certain period of time. And we didn't just see probably one 200K smash buy, which I imagine is something that somebody who's trying to keep it under wraps wouldn't do, because that would obviously raise some eyeballs. So, we saw him say that. We don't know the type of, there hasn't been any traces to the wallets or anything like that. But it is interesting that he came up and said, that he's been traveling the world talking to all of these different places. And, he's been in Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, all of these different places, basically preaching about Bitcoin. And, he's hearing these types of statements come out, and he just isn't directly reporting it.
And so the 2 million coins that are held on exchanges, is there a way to know, or do you know what percentage of those coins, if any, are coins held by customers who haven't taken self-custody of their coins? Is that 2 million that are coins for sale, or is that just the overall amount that's estimated to be on exchanges?
Yeah, that's the estimated amount according to CoinGlass right here. I'm not sure if it's like all of the Bitcoin that is left on exchanges. I'll have to look into that a little bit further, but we do have about 2.23 million left on exchanges. And I think CoinGlass even does like a breakdown of how much is on each exchange. So let me see if I could pull that up here real quick. Because it just looks like, we've got a 24-hour change. Like, it has Coinbase Pro, Binance, all of these different places. So you can see basically on each exchange how much Bitcoin that they have and how much it changes over the past 24 hours, 7 days, and 30 days. So, you can see here Coinbase Pro had 12,000 or 11,500, excuse me, taken off in this past week. But on the flip side of things, you get Binance adding Bitcoin on their exchange. And, over the past 30 days, Binance has added 30.5K Bitcoin on their exchanges. So it is kind of interesting to look at it, but that's a good question, Eric. I'll have to look into that a little bit more.
Yeah, it makes me think that those are predominantly customer-owned coins, because, maybe this is a dumb question, but wouldn't it mean that then Coinbase is how many? I can't see on the screen here because we're using a prompter. How many coins does Coinbase Pro have?
They have almost 700,000 coins.
So Coinbase doesn't own those coins. Those have to be predominantly customer-owned coins.
Yeah, I mean, it would be safe to assume that, or they have like a little amount left where they could be purchasing that Bitcoin, right? So, I mean, the known OTC wallets that we have about 155,000 Bitcoin left, and those are the essentially the big players, right? I mean, this is what was reported by these OTC desks trade at the balance, and then you can look at this right here from TradingView where it shows about 155,000, and the OTC desk obviously are the 50K plus purchases, so that's where the big dogs are getting all of their Bitcoin from. So Coinbase Pro, if I'm not mistaken, is one of those big players. So but a lot of these people, when they're buying from Coinbase, Binance, Gemini's, Kraken, those guys, they keep it on exchanges, right? I mean, they're not like really looking to take that self custody. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these are, customer owned Bitcoin, and we just haven't had that bank run yet.
That makes sense.
Dude, this has been awesome. Thank you for helping us set up our first stream. Is there anything else we should hit on? We've got about a little less than 10 minutes left if we want to hit on anything else.
No, man. I mean, I think it's just a lot of bullish news of what we see for Bitcoin, and I think more people are starting to wake up as we're seeing, like you said, Robert, the Fed. Just anytime Jerome Powell opens his mouth, I feel like he's sticking his foot in it. So more people are waking up to that, and then we see sovereign wealth funds, pension funds buying Bitcoin, and at least maybe these paper Bitcoin proxies, but trying to get some sort of exposure to Bitcoin. And then, we see people recognizing Bitcoin as, the apex predator that it is, and it's starting to swallow up all of these different industries. So I think over time, we're just going to start to see this start to accelerate, and more people are going to start taking Bitcoin off exchanges. And it's just a matter of time before Bitcoin just ultimately continues to win.
And so how are you feeling about Bitcoin price action through the end of the year? Dare I ask that?
I was just going to ask
A
you
nasty
that
question.
I mean, I think personally, I think the way we're seeing it right now, and the transmission of information, I feel like everybody is saying that we're going to crab walk up and, get to that, 150, 200, maybe even 250,000. I think that this bull run is going to be a little bit elongated. So I wouldn't be surprised if we hit that 250 by the end of the year. But I also think like 25 is going to be an interesting year. And that's where we can start to see, the potential of that short squeeze come on, just because of, the amount of buying that we're seeing, publicly traded companies start to come on, all of these things. I mean, the bigger money's here, and it's not going anywhere, to say the least.
Do you think we're going green, 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 red, or do you think we're gonna break that pattern or the cycle?
I mean, I think we're still gonna have the 4-year cycles. I mean, as it stands right now, we're still in like the fiat economy, right? So I think it's more in line with the business cycles opposed to the halving cycle that everybody wants to equate it to. Because if you look at the amount that bit left to be mined, it's like 6-7% at this point. So I don't think it's necessarily that driving the market. I think it's more of the hodlers out there, the psychopaths like us three sitting here who just don't want to sell our Bitcoin, and everybody else wanting to come in and getting Bitcoin at the price they deserve, really. So I think, we'll still have a lot of volatility, especially if a nation state like the United States announce, hey, we're going to do the Cynthia Lummis plan, buy 200,000 Bitcoin over a 5-year period. Then everybody's going to try to front run. So, I mean, there's a lot of different scenarios I think you could line out here where the volatility is not over with. And I still think we're going to have some of those cycles, but ultimately, Bitcoin's going to win. It's just, I don't think the quote unquote volatility is gone just yet.
And the strategy does not change then. Stay profitable, stack sats, in cold storage, hold forever.
Yeah, I'm curious, and I'm sure our viewers would like to hear you speculate a little bit. What do you think we're going to see over the next year? Just for fun, you think there's going to be some mega players that fuck around
Price
and find
action,
out?
man?
Just, I don't know, it's Coinbase is, get nationalized, fucking
No.
Sailor goes rogue.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I think to speculate about what we're going to see over the next 12 months is a much higher Bitcoin price. That's about all I can say.
United States makes a purchase.
I don't know.
Apple
I really
adopts
don't know.
a Bitcoin strategy.
I really don't. I think you'll see more imitators, right? That's everything. All cultural transmission occurs through imitation. So we're seeing that with Bitcoin treasury companies. You're seeing the mind virus of Bitcoin spread more and more. Again, it's not, it is a very deep, infinitely deep rabbit hole, but the value proposition can be summarized in very few words, right? Money printing bad, money you can't print good. Number go up, that's not too easy for people to, or not too difficult rather for people to grok, I don't think, in the information age. And
Good point.
That idea spreads very rapidly now that all of the restrictions to the movement of information have basically been lifted. Bandwidth costs zero, as we're doing right now. Not zero, but close to it. So these ideas are spreading fast. And how can you, we all know, right? We've seen people become Bitcoiners. It's a one-way street. It's an irreversible transformation. Once you become a Bitcoiner, you cross the event horizon, you don't come back out.
Except for Taleb.
Well, Taleb, yeah, because he's fragile.
He's fragile. So TikTok next block, basically. Yeah. Get some sunshine, eat good food, go to the gym.
Yeah. Enjoy your life.
Spend time with your friends and family.
Don't pay attention to Jerome Powell. Turn off the TV.
Nervously biting his toenails.
Lift some weights.
Foot in his fucking mouth.
Stack some sats. This has been fun, guys. Thank you. Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any parting words?
Hey man, stay humble, stack sats, and then subscribe to this channel, guys, because I think we're gonna do some more here in the next couple weeks. So
should we do this every Friday? Every Friday?
Yeah, we'll figure that out. But yeah, we'll be bringing it live more often.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to do this live. No, you don't need the editors, the whole thing.
I think people like it too.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get some kind of live. Oh, that's what I was just about to say.
Oh yeah.
I didn't see the chat.
Anything good in the chat?
I don't know. We got a lot of things just humming along, man. So I know we've got I think we saw chat on X and on YouTube.
Sorry, guys. We missed all the chat.
Oh, well, let's extend for a few minutes. What do you got?
This is our first. Yeah, I got to go.
You got all sorts of important stuff to do.
But now we know where the chat button is. Thank you for being patient with us on our first stream while we figure all this stuff out. And next time we could take questions from the chat.
Yeah.
Live Q&A.
We're figuring it out. The only thing that I've figured out is 21 million doesn't give a fuck. That's all I know. Everything else in the world is totally in question.
Mic drop.
Amen to that. So we're ironing some kinks out, but we're gonna get this thing down, and we're gonna get these live streams humming along, to say the very least. So I'm excited. So yeah, everybody, let us know what you guys think too in the comments and everything like that. How did we do? Did you guys hate my mustache coming on here with Robert? Are these guys making me look small on camera too? I mean, I know we got some brawly characters over there. Maybe
I'm sitting right next to this guy. What, 6'4", 230?
Yeah,
I'm in decline right now.
Oh, dude, it's so funny listening to you say you're out of shape, dude.
Not out of shape. I'm losing weight.
Yeah,
it's cutting season.
I hear you're working out with Morelli these days, Robert, too. So I might need to get on that, man.
I've done a couple of workouts with Morelli, and he is talk about a psychopath. That guy likes to do 1,000 reps in an hour. It's too much.
He's getting me on Fit Script. I'm gonna get some blood work done. I haven't had my blood work done ever, so we'll see how that goes.
There we go. So coming in like a couple months, then I think all three of us will be looking a little different. Maybe not you as much, Robert. You're just cutting a little bit, but me and Stacks over here might be a little bit jacked here.
This is what Bitcoin does to you.
More of this camera.
I think you turn into a meathead by getting into Bitcoin at some point. It's like, what else are you gonna do? You got all this time on your hands. You want to protect your family. You want to feel good about yourself. Go lift some weights.
Buy some firearms.
buy some firearms, study a martial art.
There we go.
All
I
right,
think that's
Brandon.
a perfect way to wrap it up.
Well,
Well,
all these things you have to answer for yourself, which is like, what are you going to do with all that freedom that Bitcoin affords you?
just 12 words away. 12 words away.
Okay, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. We appreciate what you do. I think this is a good collaboration. Compiling some of this stuff is, I commend you for it. It's not easy. I try. In some ways, I got my head buried in the sand, but you know.
Hey man, I'm just here to bring it to you guys, and then we'll keep getting you guys. I'll keep bringing you guys the news so you guys can just say, hey, just buy Bitcoin, and everybody will enjoy that notion over time, I think.
And Brandon does the curation of all this, so you guys hit him in the DMs or wherever and let him know what you want us to talk about.
Yeah, let us know in the comments if you guys see something going on. I'm over at Green Candle as well. I'm doing this, on a semi-frequently basis. So come check me out over there. And yeah, I think we're going to be doing this collab a little bit more.
This is the part where we're supposed to say like and subscribe.
Yes,
I always forget
like
that.
and subscribe. If you like us, subscribe to us.
Or if you don't
we'll
like
you
us,
back.
subscribe anyways. Who gives a fuck?
Subscribe anyways. That's true.
Who gives a fuck? That's one of the things I've learned from you. You're really good at not giving a fuck.
Oh,
but you
thank
also
you.
care. But this
That's
is
the
where it's
nicest thing you ever
so
said to me.
paradoxical, dude. You like care the most and simultaneously don't.
Well,
Impressive.
the unity of opposites, just like Bitcoin. I'll take it as a compliment.
All right, we could go on and on and on, but let's wrap it up.
Okay. See you guys next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Later.